Welcome, everybody. I'm happy you were able to join me. I know it's been a crazy year for all of us, but I'm excited to be with you here on Zoom to kind of take a break and share our common interest and love for photography. I'm hopeful we'll all be getting back to normalcy over the next coming months, and I know you're feeling the same way too. This afternoon, I want to share with you some of my photography from my international travels before COVID came on the scene in early 2020, along with what I've been up to over the last year during lockdown. Once COVID hit in mid-March, all our international travels were postponed at least a year. This gave me some time to enjoy the photography closer to home here in the U.S. and in my big backyard of Montana. And just a note, I'm a strong believer in mask wearing, got it right here, and social distancing. Safety comes first as far as I'm concerned. And I made sure that anything I did followed the COVID guidelines in keeping not only myself safe, but others around me as well. To give you a little history, I moved out west here to Bozeman, Montana from Minnesota almost 35 years ago to be closer to Yellowstone National Park. But over the years, my work's taken me elsewhere around the world. I love what I do for a living, traveling, and I feel fortunate to be able to do that. But over the last 15 plus years, I've been on the road away from home 8 to 9 months a year. So I kind of look at COVID as just a break. 2020 and 2021 gave me the opportunity to explore close to home, and I can honestly say that I've been having an absolute blast, just hanging out on my own, no schedule, just looking for critters to photograph. So let's get into my year of photography, riding out the pandemic, self-isolating with Mother Nature. So yes, I do love photography, and I've been excited about it since I was 16 years old, and I've always enjoyed sharing that passion with others. Some of you may know my work from the old days where, like many photographers, I was working with mainly magazines, book publishers, calendar companies, card companies, conservation groups, and others. Pretty much anybody that had a use for wildlife and natural history images. But like all things in life, things change, and much of my business today revolves around teaching photography. We're going to start with how 2020 began, pre-pandemic, where my wife and I were heading to the high Himalayas as well as Japan and eventually Borneo. We'll discuss a trip to the only state in the U.S. with credible COVID protocols at the time, and end with projects that I pulled out of my hat, exploring close to home, living out of the back of my truck, just like I did for 3 decades when I was earning my main income from producing stock photography of wildlife and nature. So the last time I was with you guys and gals, I was shooting mostly micro four thirds, and in particular the Lumix system. But today I'm all over the board. I'm now shooting Sony, Olympus, Lumix, GoPro, iPhone, and DJI drones, and as you're going to see in the program, I'm shooting more video than ever. I really don't believe any longer that there's just one system. I've come to realize that whatever I need to get the job done is what I now use. Like this situation in the Italian Alps where all I had was the Sony RX100 Mark VII. We'd made our way up to the top of this mountain for scenery and landscapes, but lo and behold, as is often the case with me, the scenery was upstaged by these interesting birds known as alpine choughs. And all I had with me with fast autofocus was a point and shoot. But I'd heard the RX100 Mark VII had autofocus similar to the Sony A9. I'd never tried it on anything action-related, but figured this was a good time to give it a spin. And I wasn't disappointed, and quite surprisingly, I was very impressed. It's obvious the RX100 Mark VII has an autofocus system that is seriously state-of-the-art, and proves the point I often like to make, and that is, it's imperative we keep our minds open to new technology. When this whole crazy pandemic began, my wife was on her way to India. Tanya was leading a very small group to the cremation capital of the world, Varanasi. Varanasi sits on the banks of the Ganges River, where they burn over 100 bodies a day, and the ashes are thrown into its waters. It's believed to be the home of the beginning of Buddhism. It's also thought that Varanasi is the place Buddha gave his first sermon around 528 BC. Obviously, you don't go to Varanasi for wildlife, but I will say that these photos my wife shot are mesmerizing, and I'll be accompanying the group to Varanasi next year. After Varanasi, I met my wife and the rest of the group in New Delhi, India, and from there we flew to the high Himalayan town of Leh in northern India, our first stop on our way to search for the elusive snow leopard. Something you all may know, since you're from Colorado, is that when you go unusually high, it's mandatory to spend some time at lower elevations to acclimate to the extreme altitude. Leh is 11,500 feet, and the Snow Leopard Lodge is a little over 13,000 feet. So we spent the time exploring around the city of Leh, which has beautiful photo opportunities, such as the Thixi Monastery. These interesting carved rocks surrounding the Thixi Monastery are Buddhist mani stones, which are basically just carvings of prayer in Tibetan Buddhism. And this is looking down on a section of Leh that we might all refer to as the suburbs. This is a beautiful building known as the Shanti Stupa. Stupas are basically Buddhist commemorative monuments, and they can come in all different sizes. This is a big one, shot from a very long distance. Stupas can be fancy and ornate and are typically considered to be a place of burial or a receptacle for religious artifacts. But our real goal were the cats, and so after our 2 nights in Leh, we arrive at the Snow Leopard Lodge, 13,000 feet high in the rugged Himalayas. And the night skies are the most impressive I've ever seen. No light pollution, no air pollution. It's absolutely crystal clear and just stunning. But as I said, we were after the cats, and to help accomplish that, we had dozens of guides stationed throughout the rugged mountains and valleys, but we rarely saw these guys. All of the guides were local people who used to raise sheep and yaks, but are now mainly employed to find the cats. At one time, the cats were a serious detriment. The locals, you might say, were less than enthusiastic, and actually that would be an understatement. They would have to keep their livestock in contained little areas like this to keep from losing their animals to the snow leopards. And here's a newer version of that same little corral, only with wire on top. The conservation group Snow Leopard Trust has a program to distribute wire to the local people, free of charge, to keep the cats from getting their livestock. It's quite simple. If the livestock are safe, the people are happy, and the snow leopards are allowed to coexist. Tourism is now the leading way for local people to earn a living. Here's a local lady making a snow leopard from the wool of the sheep her family raises. These are beautiful handmade items they sell to the tourists, and we actually bought several. They cost about $25 a piece, not a lot of money to us, but it's a lot of money to the local folks. But looking for the leopards is not just a job for the guides, it's our job to look for cats as well, and we were happy to help out by using our telephoto lenses, binoculars, and spotting scopes. The more eyes, the better. Gulzar, our main guide, is in radio communication with all the other guides we have spread out across the mountains. And while you're looking for cats, you also have the opportunity for enjoying or photographing the breathtaking scenery. Lots of prayer flags flying in the mountain passes that add beautiful color to a rather monotone landscape. It was fun to see chukar partridge in the place that they originated from. We have these beautiful birds here in the West, but I had no idea they were an introduced species. Something similar to our bighorn sheep and mountain goats is the Himalayan ibex. We didn't get to see a lot of these guys, but they're there, and we're hoping to get closer next time. Then there are the yaks that roam the high country, basically a high-altitude bovine that has lung capacity 3 times the normal North American cow. Another animal, the Ladakhi urial, may even be closer to our bighorn sheep than the ibex I mentioned earlier. Their eyes are virtually identical to our bighorn sheep. And like our mountain goats, have a love for life way above the tree line. And when we found the cat, unfortunately, he was a long, long ways away. So in this situation, I was using my Micro Four Thirds equipment, the Olympus EM1X. The great thing about this system is that it's relatively small, relatively compact. I've got 1200 millimeters, the 300 millimeter f4 with a 2x teleconverter, and then the Micro Four Thirds body giving me 1200 millimeters of telephoto, which in this situation for these cats is almost minimum. We're seeing them at a great distance, so you need a lot of magnification. And there he is. Can you see him in the left image? Probably not. That's why I circled him in the right. We spent several hours hoping things would get better, but unfortunately the light disappeared and the clouds rolled in. But hey, as you guys know, that's wildlife photography. No guarantees. We're hoping for better opportunities next year. We got one last chance after the leopard woke from a long nap and sat on the edge of the rocks against the skyline in the lower right corner of this frame. Not the greatest light, not the closest, but it is a snow leopard, an animal it's estimated only 7,000 foreigners have ever laid eyes on. From the Himalayas, we fly back to New Delhi and then on to Japan, where our main subjects were the Japanese macaque, also known as a snow monkey, whooper swans, and the red-crowned crane. Our first stop was the Jigokundani Snow Monkey Lodge, one of my favorite places I've been going to since the mid-90s. Extremely rustic, exceptionally traditional, and one of the coolest places I've ever stayed. Jigokundani is a park that's been set aside for the wild Japanese macaque to keep them from marauding the local farmers' fields. Lots of opportunities of these gorgeous animals that are the most northern primate in the world. The fur on these guys is impressive and helps keep them warm in a relatively cold winter climate, but like everywhere else, it's not as cold as it used to be. Next, we head to the beautiful wild areas of Hokkaido, where our first stop was Lake Kushiro and the whooper swans. The whooper swans migrate in the fall to Lake Kushiro, most of them coming from Russia. And then there are the red-crowned cranes. Then over to the coast for the white-tailed eagles. And the Steller sea eagle. After Japan, it's off to Indonesia and the island of Borneo, our main goal being orangutans. To get there required us to fly into Jakarta, a city with over 10 million people on the world's most populated island. It's a place with lots of cultural history and fascinating temples like Borobudur, a Buddhist temple from the 9th century and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And every morning at sunrise, the locals begin their daily prayers. But our main reason for going to Borneo were the orangutans, so up the river we went on our way to more wild parts of Indonesia. Along the river, there's lots of opportunities for proboscis monkeys. And proboscis monkeys have no problem with water, unlike the orangutans that will not cross the river under any circumstance. But as I said earlier, our hearts and minds were set on the orangutans, and we weren't disappointed. Our second Borneo trip was canceled due to the pandemic, and as we all started to head for home, we found the airports close to empty, almost nobody in the corridors. Needless to say, we were all anxious to get home since there was very little known about this virus at the time. I'd heard a Delta pilot telling a flight attendant they wouldn't be flying in a week. It was scary and created a lot of anxiety for my wife and me, both of us concerned about the people who trusted us while traveling to a foreign land. A big part of that anxiety was due to visions of some government quarantine facility when we hit the shores of Los Angeles. And I was more than a little concerned that we might get stuck locked down in a place like this for 2 weeks. Okay, a little bit of humor here about this dreadful-looking imaginary quarantine facility. These pictures aren't really a government COVID center in California, but it was still nerve-wracking. This is actually Coleman's Cop in Namibia. A little dusty and far from comfortable looking, but something I imagined as a worst-case scenario when returning stateside. So after a couple months of pretty much self-isolating in our home, I started getting a little more adventurous. My friend Denver Holt of the Owl Research Institute was as busy as ever, and I went up to give him a hand. Denver's quite an outgoing guy and very good on camera. For something to do that would be beneficial for the Owl Research Institute, I pitched him the idea of a little series of videos on his work we call Owl Notes.
Okay, so here we are in this spruce bog, mostly Engelmann spruce, tamarack, some cottonwoods. It's actually kind of a diverse habitat. So many of you know we've had the camera up now for a couple months, I believe, and we've been monitoring, the incubation period and the nestling growth. So we're trying to time it so we can go up here in one trip and ban both of the chicks and see what goes on, and if possible, capture an adult. Yeah. Flip, reach over to your left and pull that. Yeah, just flip it. See if it'll flip. You want to put it right down in here? Hold that right there, thanks. Okay, let me just... And then all of a sudden she just started, she pooped and she came right in. So Lib, with your right hand, can you hold him a little bit? And let me put the hat over him, Beth. Just calm him down a bit. She'll eventually roll this flange over and the bird won't be able to. Lib, I'm going to give you this bird. Okay. Right hand, up on the leg, stay high on the leg. Left hand, stay high on the leg. When you're ready, Lib.
Okay. Okay.
Just toss them up in the air. And probably live right around, yeah, to your left, right about where your foot is, right there. But let me just try to walk it up. Let me lift her up here. I want to go slow. I don't want to knock the snag over. Yeah, that's all right. Look at the size of those legs. Hey, buddy, all right? Sure, if it works. Sounds fine. Yeah, right there. Good?
Yeah.
Oh. Get that slip. Hey, easy, easy. Easy, and we'll both be better off. So we were able to ban the male, take the measurement data. We thought the male would be the harder one to get, so we just really lucked out on that. And then the female will try again. We climbed up in the nest tree, and it's kind of interesting that you have such a diversity of trees in here. And these are cottonwoods, and there's not a lot of areas where great grays nest in broken top cottonwoods. The reasons are hard to say, but here's where the kind of the boreal forest of this region comes down and meets kind of the temperate forest. So we've got a mix, a nice diversity of trees in here. So these cottonwoods, they kind of die early. They snap off pretty readily, and those are the cavities. Unfortunately, or the nest platforms, unfortunately, they also fall over real easily. So when we were climbing just now, it was a little scary, you know. I mean, I won't say scary. It was just like, hope that it doesn't fall over. So anyway, this is the habitat. And we'll come back in here soon and try to get the female. And then now, once we get them all marked over the course of years, and we're still learning here in the Great Gray Project, but over the course of years, we'll be able to tell you, does the male return to the area? Does the female return to the area? Does a pair stay together? Maybe some information on dispersal of the young. Do they survive? Should they move a mile away or 5 miles away, find another mate? And so marking them is an important part of just the research.
So that was how I started the summer off, and over a few days we produced a series of 5 Owl Notes videos. Feel free to look them up on our Natural Exposures TV YouTube channel. We'd love to have you come subscribe. But as the summer went on, things started to loosen up a bit, and we were able to fit our Alaska bear trips in. Certain states allowed access but required a COVID test. Alaska was one of them, and it actually felt relatively safe. Got my face covering on, but the airport is got a few people in it, but almost non-existent. Difficult to find a place to get something to eat, and it just seems like a different place. Pretty crazy. Off to Alaska to see the bears. One good thing for sure, the bears have all been tested and they do not have COVID-19. We're looking forward to that. So here we are at the Ted Stevens International Airport, and the Alaskans seem to have this pretty well under control. I'm pretty impressed. Fill out a form, get a barcode, and send you on your way. It's really been a good experience. It was a very positive experience flying up on Delta, and then now seeing that they're really taking this seriously, bringing people into their state. Very, very impressed. It looks good. So far, I'm feeling pretty good. So as usual, getting to Alaska was the least enjoyable part of the trip, but with COVID restrictions, it was even a bit more daunting. Once we got there, it was like going back in time. No need for masks and social distancing wasn't a problem in the great outdoors. Everybody had a COVID test, so you felt pretty safe, although, as you know, obviously nothing's perfect. Well, let me take that back. The bears were actually perfect. This is a new spot that I'm going to that has incredible, stunning possibilities. Everywhere we go is by bush plane, which gives us the opportunity to get to the best places the bears are at on any particular day. The other exciting element of this trip is the color of the salmon. These guys are sockeyes, also known as reds. And that beautiful intense color simply helps make more interesting images. There's lots of moms with cubs. Fabulous action. More moms with cubs. And the bears aren't the only subjects that are possible. This red fox surprised me one morning as I followed him into the woods. The day before, I'd seen him pass by my cabin with a pine squirrel in his mouth. This morning, he walked by my cabin, and I grabbed my camera and followed him into the timber. He walked up to a big pine tree, and he stood up on his hind legs, looking up into the branches. He then went over to the trunk of the tree and stood up on the broken limbs closest to the ground, looking up. And then he began to climb the tree, like the limbs were the steps of a ladder. This image shows him about 15 feet off the ground, which you can't tell, and you'll have to take my word, but I was absolutely flabbergasted this guy climbed this tree using the limbs. This was the last frame I took just before he started coming down. The only thing I can figure he was doing was looking for squirrels. I'm guessing he used this same technique the day before to grab the squirrel he had in his mouth. I've heard of gray fox climbing trees, but I've never heard of or seen a red fox climb a tree. It was pretty impressive, and it's always fun to see something you just don't expect. So with that, let's head back to Montana for the last part of 2020 and into 2021. Hi everybody, I'm Daniel Cox from Natural Exposures TV, here in my home state of Montana, on the road, taking pictures, and I want to bring you with me. So that short intro is just a sliver of my adventures in the fall of 2020 when COVID-19 began to spike again. The great thing about being a wildlife and natural history photographer is the fact that it's very normal to be isolated. Self-seclusion is pretty much a given in this line of work, and that's a good thing in the midst of a pandemic. So I've been very fortunate since the act of social distancing worked really well over these past 12 months. Since this was the first time I'd been home in the summer and fall in almost 20 years, I began to explore my backyard, and I used just about every mode of transportation I could find. It all began close to home, spending time in a local park that I'd never visited before. And then just behind my home, the opportunity to work with white-tailed deer in the surrounding hayfields. We had the excitement of a wildfire way too close to home. So mid-September I hit the ground running, spending time in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, including Yellowstone National Park. Smoke from California filled the skies. And that created lots of color in otherwise not so colorful landscapes. A very large grizzly took down a magnificent bull elk on the Yellowstone River. And he fed on it for over a week, giving me and a small group of my absolute closest friends amazing photo opportunities from across the river. With fall came the excitement of the rut. The season of hyperactivity. The bears were fattening for the winter. And the otters doing what otters do, seemingly just having fun. Creatures large and small, and those that fly, were all around me in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Okay, so let's take a short intermission from my wildlife work, since I'm guessing you folks might be getting a little hungry, and I'll share with you my version of drive-ins, diners, and dives. Greetings everybody, I'm Daniel Cox from Natural Exposures TV here in my home state of Montana on the road taking pictures, and I want to share with you today my version of drive-ins, diners, and dives. And working off the back end of my Ford F-150, I'm guessing would probably qualify for the dive part, but that's another story. What we're going to do is I'm going to share with you how I fix a nice warm meal while I'm on the road taking pictures. And when you're working in cold conditions like we are here in Montana, we've got snow and it's been in the 20-degree range this morning. It's really nice to have a hot warm meal. So I'm going to show you how I create a really tasty, enjoyable hot panini sandwich using my Coleman stove and some of the ingredients here. So we're going to start with the whole wheat bread, a good quality whole wheat bread. We're going to use a little Miracle Whip, which is one of my favorites. One of the other ingredients will be Famous Dave's signature spicy pickles, which is really great. And then we're going to use some Colby cheese and some really high quality smoked turkey. So let's get started. I'll show you how I get this put together and get it warmed up on the stove and make a panini. My poor man's panini maker, I call it. Okay, let's first get our Coleman stove fired up. And the key is to keep it on a real nice low heat. There she is. She's putting off heat. Take the bread. We'll put a little mayo on there. Now, don't want to use too much. Now, let's take and add a piece of this beautiful Colby cheese. Put that on top of there. And let's get some nice turkey. Nice chunk of turkey there. All right, now we're going to take Famous Dave's signature spicy pickle chips. That's what they call it. All right, we're going to put these on there. These really add some nice flavor to the sandwich and gives it a little bit of that crunchiness that you like. You know what I'm saying? I think you know what I'm saying. There we go, look at that. Now, the other idea is to put another piece of cheese on top of here, and that way when they melt together, they will kind of hold the pickles in, because the pickles have a tendency to come off. So what we're going to do now is put a little bit of mayo on top, and this will keep the sandwich from sticking, and it also makes it real nice and crunchy when it cooks. She's cooking on me a little faster than I'd like. See, there goes a pickle. Out of control pickle. So here's where the panini part comes in. So I'm going to take these side panels off here and just close that lid down just like that. And you can kind of push on it a little bit. There she is. She's coming. Look at that. Boy, that's coming nice. Get my signature panini ingredient on the other side there. Okay. Okay, look at that. So I don't really have a specific amount of time that I keep it on each side that it cooks. I just kind of look at it. Cheese is starting to melt. Pickles are getting warm and getting a little crispy on top. So that's kind of how I judge it. Push this down a little more. Creates that little panini effect. And really brings the sandwich together. Let me go get my knife. Oh, she's got to cook a little more. But you can see the key to this is to not have the fire too hot, because you'll burn it, obviously. And then by keeping the lid down, it creates that nice warm environment for the cheese to melt and the pickles to get warm and the turkey to get warm, and then get that nice crusty part on the outside of the sandwich. That's what really makes a sandwich good. That crustiness on the edge of the sandwich, we'll show you here in a minute, where that Miracle Whip just kind of soaks into the bread a little bit and gets cooked, nice and cooked, and creates that little crunchiness on the outside. Okay, well here we go. Looks like she's pretty much done. Yes, sir. A little hot there. Let's bring her over here. We'll cut it. Oh yeah, look at that. Whoops, I went one of my pickles. Oh yeah, crunchy on the outside, melted cheese on the inside. That's a good sandwich. So that concludes Natural Exposure's version of Drive-Ins, Divers, and Dives. Drive-Ins, diners, and dives. Thanks for joining me. And when you're out there taking pictures and you're cold and ready for a meal, don't forget your Coleman stove and the ingredients for a nice hot panini. Thanks for joining me.
Okay, so back on the road later in the fall, searching for bighorn sheep, something that I've wanted to do for many, many years, and finally had the time to do it. The rut takes place in November, and it's always good to try and be there at the very beginning. It's a time when the rams are super active. And the head clashing begins in earnest prior to actually the breeding season. Unfortunately, I was a bit late this year and didn't get a lot of the males fighting. But I did get to see a lot of great natural behavior, and what more can you ask than to be in the mountains in November? I wrapped up the fall shoot in Montana in late November, and then waited for January and the calming quiet of winter. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please come visit us on our Natural Exposures TV YouTube channel, our Natural Exposures Facebook fan page, our website, naturalexposures.com, which includes our corkboard blog, and we're also on LinkedIn and Instagram. I hope to meet some of you folks along the trail.